state for the record that for the Wednesday, November 13th, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Finance Committee meeting, we have here in attendance Director Rachel Kurtz, Director Tom Finn, Director Stephen Burke, and Chief Mark Pomey in attendance. Directors Bruce Goings and Mark White are absent, as is Dan Schwartz for this meeting. We have approved the consent calendar with unanimous vote. And for action item 7A, the fiscal year 22-23 financial audit, we had a motion by Director Burke, a second by Director Finn, and all were in favor for a passed motion.
Thank
Please
you, Martina.
continue.
All right.
Thank you, and my apologies for not asking to start the recording. All right, sorry to interrupt.
I can make some coffee for us all.
Yeah.
So as I was starting to mention was that we made a commitment for any unspent rollover or unspent in chipper days in 23-24 to be rolled over into the zones proportionate to the percentage of revenue for each zone. So we worked with each zone. You'll see in that rollover where they have chosen to put it. For the most part, it's gone into evacuation projects within those zones. And it was approximately 294,000 of unspent that we had accumulated over the first 3 years of Marin Wildfire. And that's a commitment that we've made to the operations committee that in subsequent years, any unspent from chipper days will get pushed back into the zones. Another thing that was expressed as a potential concern last year as we closed the books was continuing to roll over our administrative monies back into administrative monies. Well, I think we've developed enough of a track record that we know our spending rate for admin right now. And so you're going to see approximately, I think it's $200,000 that's being moved from admin into operations. That'll include $100,000 going from unspent admin into grant programs. And then $100,000 from, and correct me if I'm wrong on the second number, Elisa, from employee salaries and wages to the core project that is funding the vegetation management specialists. The reason why we did that is originally the vegetation management specialists were designed that we would do project-based budgeting, but that proved to be difficult for the member agencies because they didn't know how much they were going to be able to spend on their target because they were unclear how much vegetation management specialist time that they were going to tap into. So as we worked through that challenge, we had an ad hoc subcommittee of the operations committee, and they agreed that if we have some unspent revenue from or unspent budget from finance or from admin, to move it into that so that we can remove that uncertainty from our member agencies on how much they actually have to spend on their projects. And I also think I'm proud of the fact that we're able to move that much from our administrative budget. We're staying that lane that we're able to move it from the admin over to operations and actually turn it into effective work on the ground. With that, I'll pass it off to Elisa to start down discussing our closeout rollover, and I may interject at places here or there.
Let's pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions on the intro on that? I just had one question. Are we going to incorporate those rollover guidelines into policy?
That we can definitely talk about that when we get to the financial policy updates.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alyssa.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. I could just walk you through our report and just stop me if you have any questions. And as you can see, I do also get a little tired of saying all these fiscal years, so I attempt to shorten it by using, so I call 23-24 fiscal year 24. I don't know if that's really catching on, but yeah, we have 3 years in a row kind of active. But this is the report for last fiscal year 24. And the expenditures were under budget by $2.1 million. And the categories are here. The core program was under by $2 million. A couple of things to note about that. The budget here included about $3 million in prior year rollover. And the agencies did a great job of eating through their prior year rollover balances as we'll show later in that table, the CHU table. And then as Mark mentioned, well, local D-space payments were over budget because our revenue was over budget, so we paid them out accordingly. Administrative costs were under by 232,000, and as Mark mentioned, 174,000 of that is being rolled over into the core program from admin. And then the balance is staying in the admin rollover. Then here are some.
If I can interrupt real quick, Elisa, while we're talking about the admin rollover, and I think it relates to the relationships that Marin Wildfire has created within our member agencies and with the environmental community. Much of that rollover is from our legal fees,
That's good.
meaning that we're not having to tap into legal services all that often.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And then here, just showing you the budget by zone versus the expenditures by zone. One of the things we did do a little differently this year was in the JPA-wide MWPA managed grant project. When we spent those funds, we actually did allocate them by zone when possible. So some of those expenses went accordingly out to their zones based on the information that we were given. But pretty in line here, budgeted versus spent.
I have a question on that page, if we don't mind. It's just an accounting question in that box in the lower right, where we're talking budget and actuals. In that far right column, we're either over or under. If we're technically looking at central JPY, we're under budget. I think the parentheses should land in those columns, and then the 402 that Novato spent over should not be in parentheses, because from a accounting perspective, when I looked at that, I made the notes. I'm like, that it doesn't look right, and it could be confusing.
Oh, darn it.
I
You're
concur.
right.
I saw that typo and I thought, oh, should I
Yeah.
bring that up here? Thank you.
No, thank you. I'll make a note to change that for the board report. Thank you.
Agreed.
Good catch.
Right. So Novato actually went over their budget. Okay, and then here's where we outline where we anticipate our rollover going. So we want to roll over almost 2.2 million back into the core program, 57,000 rolled over into admin costs, with 174 of that rolling over from admin into core.
And if I can reemphasize, we had 3 million of rollover in the core last year. We were able to chew through 1 million of that again this year. And that is because of the great work from our member agency. So we are on the right trajectory.
Great.
And then we have just the detailed attachments here. Here is last fiscal year's budget closed, with any notes here that might help you understand why something went over. I know on this one, Mark could probably explain, or everyone already knows about that subscription. With a net surplus of $254,000. And then we have the Greater Ross Valley Fuel Break Grant that is winding down, but we will have a little bit of that in this fiscal year 25, in addition to the Novato Greater Shaded Fuel Break.
Excuse me, is there a line item for grant revenue?
Yes, we have it broken out down below. So here's other income. We have grant revenue versus the grant expenditures.
Got it.
And they're just lopsided because last year the expenditures were more than the revenue, so it's just a lag there.
Got it.
Does that grant, I mean, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but does that grant have a time limit that we have to expend it?
3 years, so we're expended in half the time that we're
Yeah.
required to.
And then here is the fiscal year 25 budget revised to include any adjustments or rollovers. And this adjustment column, so here's the budget that the board approved. This adjustment column includes all the input from the agencies on where they wanted their rollovers to go. And
And right here is where we get into a spot where we do need to make it a change. And so when we have our motion that you guys will need to include this change, and you'll see that the D-space abatement is still included on this budget. We caught this after we went to posting it. As you guys know, the JPA revisions were approved, removing the abatement. So when we bring this to the board, it will be without that abatement. Then we have an abatement fund sitting in our budget right now, and we will work with each of the member agencies for them to apply that abatement fund as they deem fit. And this was something that we worked out with the Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittee, with the idea that let's use that money for the intent of which it was originally withheld for. It was defensible space money that was withheld for abatement. So we really want the member agencies to use this for on private property, on parcel property activities. And so after approval of the budget, we'll work with each of the member agencies for their share of that abatement funding to go where it should go.
That's good.
one thing to note that we're doing this year is the city of San Rafael is using the MWPA's infrastructure to pay out grants that they're going to reimburse us for. So that's this $100,000 from some of their local rollover funds. They will send us a check for that, and it will be used to fund their grants.
And we see that as an efficiency. Instead of San Rafael staff having to go through a separate grant issuing program, they're able to tap into ours. And so we feel like it creates an efficiency for our member agencies. And as an aside, for fiscal year 24-25, there's been a lot of focus on how much money we have going towards grants. If you consider whether it's Marin Wildfire, our member agencies, D-space grants, home hardening grants, or direct assistance, where we are going onto the property and doing work for the resident, or what we're calling voluntary abatement, similar to direct assistance, we're putting 2.55 million in fiscal year 24-25 towards supporting our residents for home hardening and D-space. So that's over 10% of our budget. So I think we're doing a really good job with that.
Great.
And then another new line added this year is for the Novato shaded fuel break grant funded program. This is our estimate from Novato as to what we think will be received in revenue and what they think will be spent above and beyond what's already in the work plan for that project. And then with that, we're projecting a $1.7 million deficit, which will be funded with prior year unspent funds.
And then if we achieve that deficit, that's when we start slowing down our pace and make sure that we are setting a pace that is equal to our revenue.
Exactly, almost there. So that's the proposed revised budget. Any questions on that? I'm happy to take any. Otherwise, then we get into here are last year's core projects with input from the agencies as to the status of the project and how they're going to fund an overage or where they're going to put any unspent funds. And we had input from every agency except one, so this is pretty comprehensive. And actually the one agency that didn't, they don't have core projects, so so this is all complete. And So just for example, like here, roll over the negative, so that gets, the negative is taken out of the project this year.
Say that again?
Yeah, so this, you see how this project went over budget by $9,500?
Yeah.
So when we rolled it the next year, so let's see, that's 2477. If I take you to here's next year, here's that project 2477. The rollover here would have been more because we brought some of that administrative rollover into this project, the 74K, but we subtracted out the 9508 that it went over. So we used these current year funds. It would have been more. It would have been about 74, but because it was negative,
Mm.
if that makes sense. And same with this. So here's Novato shaded fuel break. It went over because the grant funding was late. So that's 2301C. So then if I go back to Novato here, 2301C, here's that negative.
Got it.
We were so excited about starting the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break, and then the state of California's bureaucracy was 6 months late.
Yeah.
But we've since gotten funds, so we're entering them here so Novato can tell where they're really at.
What's the report card on the goat grazing project?
Which one?
Well, just curious, how effective are they?
Oh, they're great. First of all, it's a very efficient way to remove vegetation right along our wildland urban interface boundaries. And quite frankly, contrary to some concerns when we first started the grazing that it would bring about more invasives, we're actually seeing a decrease in invasives and a better return of natives.
Interesting.
And they're good ambassadors.
Yes, they are.
And they're so cute. I love to see them on the hillside.
The color coding, is that by zone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is by zone.
All right.
Central, JPA, Novato.
Any requests for a different color?
No. Thank you.
Southern Marin gets purple.
If you want, I can. I think this is your report that you provide to Southern Marin.
This is the report that every agency gets. It's updated bi-weekly, so they have a live view of what's going on. And then this is the final version with all this column is added, the comments column. But this is the same report that they see every other week with each check run.
And then to get in even further into the weeds, when we have our biweekly check run that we go through, and I have to approve each check, I actually go through the check roll, compare the check roll and the project code that's in the check roll over to this table so that we have that accountability that we're actually charging to the proper budget.
I believe Director Hillard, she really appreciates the report she gets. And Alyssa, I think you provide her that report.
Oh, yes, that's true. I drill down just on Southern Marin Zone projects and I give her a total and I just print out a giant version every time I see her in person.
Okay.
And we can set up an automatic export to board members who like, but all of your staff members also have access to the report. So when Elisa's doing it to Director Hilliard, she's doing it as a Southern Marin employee as much as she is as our treasurer.
So I have a question, I mean, to the board, do you feel like this would be helpful to the directors to have this by zone in terms of knowing where you're tracking? I don't know how much our directors have contact on a day-to-day basis with projects that are happening. And I'm wondering if a tool like this might be helpful.
In my case, I work with Director Hilliard and we get periodic reports from the veg management specialist on the work being done so that I can report out at council. So I'm satisfied with what we have in place for us, at least.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, okay, good. Thank you. This is really helpful. I think this is a good perspective to be able to see that we don't always see, because it's sort of what it gives us more tools in terms of talking to the community as well.
And as a primer for our conversation about the COC report next week, all the spreadsheet tables that you see right now are specific to the core projects. We have the same data on the local and DSpace projects as well. But since those are pass-throughs, we have not been showing that as part of the closeout. And one of the recommendations from the COC was for the board to see the closeout of the local and DSpace as well. So that's a primer for conversation next week.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
And if any board members want me to add them to the biweekly updated email about this, I'm happy to do that. Just send me an email.
I'd like it.
Who's that? Is that Rachel?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I will add you.
Thank you.
Rachel loves her spreadsheets.
I love my spreadsheets.
Oh, me too.
Is that a dig on my spreadsheets? All right. All right. Any other questions? Where we're at with the budget? Nope. Okay. Any public comment?
There are no hands at this time.
Well, I do want to show something real quick on my screen share. And Elisa referenced it, and it's something I'm very happy about. And we affectionately call it the Chew table, based on Larry Chew from the Finance Committee, who developed this table. And that's to track our requirement that 80% of our funds are spent in the zone where it was gained. And remember, year one, we hardly had any core expenditures for any of the zones. Year two, we were catching up. And so last year, none of our zones were over the 80% threshold. As you can see now, we have had every zone overspent, basically, which was by design. And we only have one zone that is underneath the 80% threshold, and that is only by 1%. And so, and the requirement was that we hit that 80% threshold by year 5. So I'm really pleased and happy with the member agencies getting out there and getting this work done.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That page.
It is.
Is that one public? Was that one out there?
We will add it to the staff report for next week. What is also, the Chew table has been a living item in the COC report.
Okay, great. Maybe we should have a new name, but that's okay. Is your question, Tom? Did you?
No, thank you.
All right.
So they ate into their balance by over $3.5 million.
I thought that was a fire industry term of art, the chew table to chew through funds.
Well, we fire Chew through
CHEW.
All sorts of.
CHU.
Mm-hmm. Good contribution. All right. So we went through public comment. No other questions. Can I get a motion?
Comment if I may, Rachel? That Chew table was really very impressive. And I think it reflects the maturation of the agency, and things are really beginning to gel, Chief. And all while you're keeping your administrative costs at 9.3% is really quite an accomplishment. I really commend you on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great. Okay. If I can get a motion. This is item B.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Alyssa. It's fantastic. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. On to policy.
And the only reason why this is on here is because of past practice. When we first developed our financial policies back in early 2021, we had an ad hoc subcommittee of the Finance Committee working with Elisa and I. And that's because it was Elisa and I. And we needed some support from the Finance Committee for the updates. Well, it's time for us we've hit the revision dates that are on our financial policies. It's time for us to review the financial policies. And what staff recommends is, rather than create an ad hoc subcommittee, you guys direct staff to make recommendations for budget or policy changes. Totally open up to suggestions such as what Rachel made earlier. And then we can bring it back to the next Finance Committee for your guys' approval.
Sufficient.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
It's the maturation part, right? We didn't have the bandwidth before. If we hadn't done that before, I wouldn't even brought this as a staff report. I would have just said, hey, by the way, we're bringing you policy updates.
So we had talked about updating policy around rollovers.
Yes.
What else do we have on that list for?
One of the items was, we have a strategic reserve that we have set aside for Marin Wildfire. We have a $3 million strategic reserve. Some of our member agencies have expressed the desire to be able to do that within their local or D space, so that if they have some unexpected claim, unexpected opportunity, or unexpected expense, that they can create their own strategic reserve. So I think that would be part of, that would fall within our disbursement policy.
Okay.
Those are about the only two that we've picked up on. The, except for our procurement policy, talks about using, the Public Works CUPCA. Long story short, we thought we were going to go down the Public Works purchasing route and the procurement, ended up not being what we should do. So we'll probably remove all the CUPCA language from our procurement policy. So those are the three items that are stuck in my head, but once we dig deep into it, we might find more.
Okay. Anyone else have any things that think about a policy that we haven't covered? No. Okay. All right, great. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good direction. We don't need a motion on that, do we?
Technically, but
And there are no hands for comment at this time.
Oh, let's have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
You all, roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
No roll. Thank you. All right. And moving on to spending money.
And so when we created our grant specialist position, we were unsure of what the workload would be for that position. And so we thought that creating it as an extra hire position would be the appropriate thing. We were thinking maybe 20, 30 hours a week. Well, this position went with the growth of the grant program, and specifically the direct assistance program, and what it takes to create a prescription for each single property that's receiving direct assistance. It's turned into a very much a full-time position. So in the name of equity of the workload for our grant specialists, we would like to bring that into a full-time equivalent position and include benefits, which the extra hire position does not include. It would be an increase of $26,000 a year, but we feel it's the right thing to do for recruitment and retention. We have added the VMS position description to the staff report, just to show how similar it is to the vegetation manager or the grant specialist position. And they're both at the same salary range with the exception of the benefits. And so we would like you to recommend to the board to convert this from an extra hire position to an FTE.
Any questions from the board? Makes sense. All right. Any comments from the public?
And I see no hands for comment at this time.
Take it back. Anything else? No. And then, so this grant specialist is just for personal grants.
It's also for writing grants to bring revenue in. Right.
Okay, so it's both.
It's both.
It's a both grant. That's a big role. Okay. Yep, absolutely.
Clarifying.
All right.
Could I suggest that maybe your next foray with the IJ would be highlighting the direct grant program
I think so.
success?
Yeah, that would be really good.
I think that'd be a good way to end the year.
Especially since I always felt that the weakness of our grant program was that it was a reimbursement program rather than actually paying for it upfront.
Right. So I think it's important to get that point across. So
Great point.
however you do it.
Thank you.
Nice idea. Okay. Can I get a motion on this item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well
All
done.
right. Good. Thank you. And moving on, any future agenda items? Nope. Not seeing any. We're adjourned.